Okay, I'm now very excited to do an interview with Luís Rudge. Luís Rudge has been a father and developer for many years. He currently works remotely as a front-end engineer for Browse.com, a Canadian company. He's also a professor at Platzi, where he creates courses for those who want to learn more about main development technologies. He's the co-founder of the company De Poster Somno Quadro, focusing on bringing innovations to the residential decoration market. And finally, Luís has also been a very active Prisma community member, and so that's why we're really excited to have him here today to share his experiences working with Prisma in different environments and different technology stacks. So welcome, Luís.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very excited about sharing a bit of my experience with you. And yeah, let's go.
All right, let's get into it. So the first question I have for you is, how do you use Prisma these days?
Right. So as you mentioned, I am a co-founder of a Brazilian company. We do sort of we're innovating the way you can decorate your house, and all of the order management, back office application, and of course the e-commerce part of this is handled by a database that is managed with Prisma, right? So that's how I'm using right now. I'm actually migrating a very, very old project that I built with other technologies, like old technologies, let's call it done technologies, to Prisma as well. So it's very exciting to be able to have the experience of working in very, very new projects with Prisma, but also bringing a project that was created 9 years ago to the current technology stack that is being used today. So it's very exciting.
I see. And I'm curious to hear, what technology stack did you use to build that project 10 years ago?
Yeah, I actually use .NET framework. I'm not even sure about the version with SQL Server. It's what I learned to develop on, and I'm probably developing professionally for I don't know 10 years. So it was my first actual project that I built from scratch alone without any help from any other person, right? So I used whatever I was feeling comfortable at the time. And of course, things changed, priorities changed, my knowledge changed as well. And as well as I was improving and kind of changing the tech stack that it was my go-to tech stack, that project stayed the same because the project was done in 2016, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There were no updates since then, but every now and then you have to go there and let just a bit of just one tiny thing, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
don't actually touch it anymore. But now I want to bring it to the 21st century, right? I want to develop something that is better for the people that are using the project, but also myself, because every time that I have to do a tiny change is a huge hurdle for me.
And I'm curious, so this 10-year-old project, it's still deployed and it's still serving users?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have close to 1,000 active users a month. It's not a lot, but for the niche that is trying to work for, it's pretty much everyone that is using it.
I see. And what was your experience sort of modernizing this 10-year-old project with Prisma? Did you use, for example, introspection to get up and running quickly with Prisma? What was sort of the approach there?
So I tried to do this multiple times with different technologies before Prisma, right? I tried
Right.
to, okay, I'm going to rebuild this with Node and whatever new ORM there was at the time. But every time I was trying to do this, I hit a roadblock that was basically I have to map my entire database and I'm not feeling it, right? So when Prisma came, and the interest when I started looking at Prisma, because Prisma I started looking pretty recently, but when I actually look at the way Prisma works and the way introspection works, and I know other tools have other introspection tools as well, but when I saw it at Prisma, it kind of clicked to me. So I did a quick test. Once you enable, once SQL Server preview was on, I did a quick test running introspection pointing to that database, and I had my entire model in, I don't know, 2 minutes, I think. So that was very fascinating. That was basically, I have this very, very old project that is working, but I don't want to change. I don't want to create a lot of stuff for it, right? So I just typed. I think at the time, I I don't remember the introspection command at the time. Right now is dbpo, right? So I typed like dbpo or equivalent, and basically all my models were there, all my types were there. I could basically access my data anywhere I wanted, and that was very exciting.
I see, I gotcha. And just to fill in some of the viewers who might not be familiar with this idea of introspection. So introspection is a concept that is sort of deeply integrated into Prisma, and the idea is that you basically point Prisma to the database URL, and you either use the Prisma db pull command or the Prisma introspect command. And what that will do is Prisma will then connect to the database, analyze all of its schema, essentially introspecting the database schema, and based on that, it will populate your Prisma schema. And so I guess based on the experience that you've just shared, Luís, that the idea there was you introspected the database, it gave you this Prisma schema from which you could generate Prisma client, and then suddenly you can do all sorts of operations against the database and make sure that you're doing them in a type-safe way, meaning that you won't try to write to a field that doesn't exist, or you won't try to read from a field that doesn't exist. Is that pretty much a correct representation of what you were doing in that project?
That's exactly it. And that was the main hurdle I had when I was trying to migrate this project in the first times. Having all my data with all my relationships and all, because it's not super complex, but it has enough complexity that it was kind of, yeah, I'm not gonna do that with other projects. And when I could just like run dbpoll and all my models, types, etc. were there, including relationships, everything, it was just like so easy. I had to do it.
I'm glad to hear, and I'm curious, were some of the features that you plan, are some of the features that you plan on working on, are these front end changes and features that involve both changes to the front end and the back end, or are these purely front end changes? What kind of changes do you plan on carrying out, and how does that influence sort of your workflow as you sort of modernize this old stack? Because I imagine that, no one wants to just modernize an old project just for the sake of it. I mean, it can be a learning experience, but oftentimes as developers, we have concrete goals that we want to reach. We want to add a new feature and so on. How does that sort of fit into what you were doing with all of the introspection?
Yeah, great question. So there's the answer, I think it's twofold, right? One, as a developer, of course, I want to have something that I can actually manage. And now every time I have to do a change, I have to open up a VM because I'm on Mac right now. I have to open up a Windows VM with Visual Studio and open and change everything, whatever I need to change, and then do a git pull and git push, and after that, the CI takes care of it, right? But I still have to have this VM with me. I still have to have all this hurdle to do tiny updates, right? And when I say tiny updates, they are very, very tiny. Sometimes I just go into GitHub and change it there and now like cross my fingers that it will work. But sometimes if I have a more considerate change, I have to actually open up the VM, right? So yes, I want to make my life easier from now on, and to do that, I think I need to bring this project to a tech stack that I'm comfortable today. But it's not only that. I could live with the VM for the next, I don't know, 5, 10 years, right? But I actually want to teach something, right? I'm planning on having, I don't know, a YouTube channel or a series of videos or something, where I can actually show how you can modernize your 10-year, your 15-year-old project with tools like Prisma, right? So it's kind of twofold here. Yes, I want to have something that is easier for me to manage from now on, but I also want to help others do the same, because I know there's a lot of people that created projects 10, 15 years ago, and they want to bring this project to this year, to this century, but sometimes it's hard, right? So if I can help these people do
Absolutely.
the same, yeah.
That's really nice of you. And would you say that in this project, the front end and the back end are decoupled? Are they sort of decoupled, and do they use a REST API, or is there something like more like the old school sort of server side rendering or the PHP style, where essentially you're doing back end logic and then spitting out HTML that is then rendered by the browser? What sort of approach there? Because I'm sure that might influence how you approach sort of modernizing it, because if the front end and the back end are really decoupled with a REST API, then you can essentially just rebuild the whole back end, the REST API, using a modern technology, and then still rely on the existing front end, and then slowly like make the change to the front end to whatever new stack that you want to use.
Yeah, that's a great question. No, no, this project specifically, it was built with .NET MVC framework. So all the HTML is server rendered. There's just a bit of logic in the client. I think at the time I used a library called Knockout.js, which at the time
Yeah.
was created by someone at Microsoft as well. So I was a very Microsoft-ish guy. So I use that, but I want to bring to something that people actually use today, right? So React, that's my personal stack is React, Node, and tools like this. So it's gonna be a full rewrite, and because it's my project and there's no like third party involved, I think I can just do it. Honestly, it's mine. So worst case scenario, I just don't publish it and it stays the same, right? But I want to bring everything to this day, create a very nice REST API, probably GraphQL. No, I'm not sure right now, but definitely splitting out backend from the front end, because that's one of the things that is not in the project right now.
Got it. Interesting. And so you mentioned this 10-year-old project, but obviously I think as your experience tells, you've worked with Prisma also in other projects. I'm very curious to hear, since you've used Prisma in a bunch of different projects, how would you compare the experience using Prisma in a greenfield, in a new project, comparing that to adopting Prisma in a brownfield project? What were some of the differences that you sort of encountered in that experience?
Right. So I think that's actually a great question. I think you can consider, I'm only talking about my experience here, right? But after I run the introspection command and I did all my mappings, right? Because when I created that database, it was created in the way that .NET developers created databases at the time. So everything was plural. Every column name was like in Pascal case, and this type of stuff is there, right? And I want to change that because I don't want my code, because when you generate with the Prisma clients, it generates exactly how it is in the database, right? So I think my brownfield experience is running introspection and mapping my entire model. After that, honestly, I can't consider this a brownfield project anymore, because now I have all my database at the tips of my fingers, and it's a new project. I can create anything I want. I can access that data any way I want. So honestly, I think it's a brownfield project until we have every mapping done, because after that, it's really up to you. Do you want to create a new project? Do you want to bring the exact same front end to your project? Fine, right? So I think and this is the difference when I started creating the other project, my current project, is I started from scratch and I just use, because I'm using the Mongo adapter, I'm not even running migrations. I just create my model and access my data, and that's pretty much it, right? So my experience between brownfield and in greenfield is basically, it is brownfield up until you map your data. After that, it's basically like any other Prisma project you're working on. Everything works, your client is perfectly mapped, you can query and send instructions to your database like you would with any other Prisma project. So honestly, it's brownfield until you map your stuff. After that, it's just greenfield.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe worth pointing out, you spoke about mapping in case viewers aren't familiar. So essentially, when in the Prisma schema, when you define a new field, that maps onto both your Prisma client and also to your database schema. And so when when you have a situation in which you want to actually have a different name in your database schema and Prisma client, for example, imagine first name, imagine that it was first underscore name, and that's how it was in the database, and you introspect that, by default, Prisma will pick that up, and you will have a Prisma underscore, a first name underscore, a first underscore name field. And what mapping allows you to do is essentially it allows you to control how you want things named in your Prisma client without changing the database schema. Is that what you are doing essentially? You are basically doing these maps in order to maintain the database schema as it is, while still sort of adopting new naming convention that fits a more modern style of naming things inside your sort of your application code.
Correct. Yeah. For example, I had like a users table, and the ID was ID uppercase, right?
I see.
And that's not the way I want to work. Not today, anyway. I want to have like the user object with the like lowercase ID, first name as in F lowercase and uppercase, and all of this. My database was not built to be like this, right? So what I did is after I run the introspection commands, the db poll commands, I just go ahead and I go into the model and I say, okay, this model here, I want to map this name users to user and map to the table users, right? Mm-hmm. And table users. And that's pretty much what I did. And that was a long day to do all of this because it's a bunch of tables, a bunch of fields, but it's worth it. At the end of the day, you have everything you want exactly the way you wanted, named exactly the way you want, and then it's just easier. For example, I'm running with a Node.js right now, so I'm just using JavaScript conventions for our namings, and it makes my life so much easier.
Got it. Thank you for sharing. And how has your experience working with different databases using Prisma been? I mean, databases, especially if you compare, say, MongoDB and SQL Server or Postgres for that matter, they have a very different paradigm. And one of the sort of core goals of Prisma is really to provide you a single way to really interact with different databases. And of course, by sort of doing that, Prisma tries to abstract a lot of the details for you, while still giving you the optional complexity to control things when you need, like you mentioned with the map. And there's many more sort of examples of this kind of like optional complexity that you have in Prisma. So that was a very long prelude to the question. What has your experience been sort of working with different databases that have a different paradigm using Prisma?
Yeah, I think I started using Prisma, testing Prisma with SQLite, right? And then of course, I tried with pet project with Postgres, but I don't use Postgres in production anywhere, so I wasn't very interested in that. But then I saw that I think the first preview one was the SQL Server, right? So I started testing with SQL Server, and then we talked about my experience with that, and then I saw the new preview for Mongo, because that's how me personally, that's how I want to start creating apps right now. With Mongo, easy, no migrations, no SQL scripts, no nothing, right? And I know it's not perfect for every scenario, but it works for my scenario. So I have experience running, when I say production payloads in both of them, but it's not kind of production in one of them, only in Mongo. And my experience is Prisma doesn't get in my way at all. I had it, and I'm running preview here, SQL preview and Mongo preview, and even then, it fits my workflow perfectly. I think the only thing that was missing in my current workflow is embedded types, and I know for Mongo, and I know this is coming, or this was already launched. I think there is a spec for it. I don't believe it's launched yet.
Yeah, I believe in the 2.29 release, we published the spec for how it's going to work, but the implementation isn't fully ready. That should come.
But I know it's coming, and that's what matters for me. For now, I have other ways of handling it, but I think having embedded types would fix, to me, it would check all the boxes for me. So honestly, my experience is as soon as you set your project up, it really doesn't matter what you're using because you're using Prisma at the end of the day. So if you know how Prisma works, everything underneath it works just great. Of course, I have to add a disclaimer here. I'm not running any very complex workflows here, like with huge reports or whatever. I'm doing basically CRUD and in a bunch of tables, and that's pretty much it, right? So for that scenario, honestly, I had no issue at all with any of them.
I see. Thank you for sharing. And one final question. What feature do you most look forward to? I guess you hinted already at document embedding in MongoDB, but I'd be curious if there's anything else or if that's the one.
No, that's the one. That's the one. I think that's for the way because I was settled on Mongo before I was settled on Prisma, right? And the way I model my data for this e-commerce, I have to have embedded types. So because of this, that's my most expected feature for the Mongo release. And of course, I want them to be released in production whenever possible.
Great. Well, anything else you want to share before we wrap up? It's been a really interesting conversation and just listening to your perspective and your experience sort of working with Prisma. But anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
Nah, just want to say thank you for inviting me to this conversation. And if you want to chat with me about this experience, please ping me on Twitter. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much. Thank you for Prisma, and let's get 3.0 released.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Luís. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you soon.
See ya. Bye-bye.